Have you ever lied to a stranger about what you do for a living? I haven't yet, but I find myself considering it quite a lot. I'm a journalist, and whenever a cab driver asks me, "So what do you do?" Sometimes I just want to say I'm a tax accountant and enjoy 20 minutes of silence. Unfortunately, I'm an honest person. From the many conversations that have ensued with cab drivers about my profession, I have brought for you today a compilation of my favorite quotes, a highlight reel, if you will. One said to me, I don't believe this whole media story about Erdogan being a dictator. I drove his daughter once, and she was so lovely, so polite. No dictator would raise such a lovely daughter. Yeah. Another one asked me very sincerely, by the way, "So where would you suggest I get my news? Because I've heard that CNN is fake." And third one, and maybe my personal favorite, is the gentleman who asked me, "Oh, so have you seen that video of Zelensky doing cocaine?" I had, in fact, seen that video, along with dozens of others digitally altered or twisted videos that the Russian government and its helpers are currently flooding the internet with. I wish I could tell you that I informed this gentleman of the dangers of disinformation, the dangers of getting your news on social media, and that I left feeling inspired by our spirited conversation. But it was late, I had a flight to catch, and I left feeling rather dispirited, not least because I knew that he was not an outlier. I was getting similar comments underneath almost all of my work about the war in Ukraine, not to mention the comments that my work garnered during the pandemic. Now, you may be thinking to yourselves, what does that have to do with me? These are other people. They're maybe not as smart as I am. Maybe they're less educated than I am. Of course, some people believe things that are untrue. The issue is not that some people have a wrong idea of reality. The issue is that increasingly, we each have our own superficial, oversimplified idea of reality. More than half of under 35s in the United States now say that social media is their primary source for news. Now, these numbers are a tiny bit lower in Europe, but we're not far behind. And while it's true that more educated people use news websites, in addition, we all get our news from social media. And this is not the social media of 2010, where you could spend half an hour reading a blog post. This is today's fast-paced, algorithm-based, video-first social media, designed to keep you scrolling for as long as possible, designed to draw you into an echo chamber filled with opinions that you already hold, proven to reinforce your existing worldview, where content is much more likely to be shared and to go viral if it's emotional, especially if that emotion is anger or fear. There's EEG evidence showing that short video consumption reduces self-control and executive control. And this constant stream of highly stimulating content and dopamine-driven feedback loops is making it harder for us to process information and to focus. Our attention spans are shrinking, reading and math scores have been declining among students for about a decade now. And this is not specific to a certain group of people. People on both sides of the left-right divide are equally likely to believe misinformation or conspiracy theories, provided that it confirms their pre-existing worldview. And political polarization is actually making us dumber. When we think in terms of our team, we get worse at simple mathematical tasks. We become less rational, and we become less inclined to take into account objective evidence. And the way that we are consuming information these days is splitting us up further into these political teams. So we're currently willingly sacrificing not only our ability to comprehend, to process, to remember information, but we're also sacrificing our ability to talk to each other across political divides. So what does that have to do with democracy? Well, in 2004, 51% of humanity lived under a democratic regime. Today, that number has dropped to 28%. Fundamentally, democracy depends on voters having a similar and somewhat accurate mental model of reality, right? We need to know what our representatives are up to and whether or not they're delivering on the promises that they made us. And democracy also depends on effective public discourse in common spaces that we all share, where I can lay out an argument, you can disagree with me, and anyone listening can build their own opinion. So brain rot is taking over as democracy is declining. We don't have a whole lot of evidence yet that this is causal, not least because that evidence is very difficult to obtain. But a 2022 review of 500 studies worldwide did conclude that digital media use likely does cause increasing polarization and increasing populism, and that likely is bad for our democracies. And my personal work as a journalist over the past decade has given me the strong sense that those two developments are in fact causally related, because we are training ourselves actively to unlearn how to handle complexity. We're giving in to our base craving for simplicity, simple answers, simple solutions, a respite from all of this cognitive overload and fatigue that we are giving ourselves. And who's offering us the simplicity that we crave? Populists. Their worldview is so simple. Us versus them. The true people versus the enemy. And that enemy can be anyone. It could be the rich, the poor, migrants, elites, the left, the right, depending on your brand of populism. And the reason that we are buying into this worldview so easily right now is because we've lost our ability to deal with a more complex one. We are falling for what the philosopher Julian Baggini calls the populist promise of a post-complexity world. And the people making us that promise, they don't care about democracy. They're not big on the rule of law, on the separation of powers, on an independent media. But why does it even matter if we lose democracy? For one, it would make us poorer. Just last year, the Nobel Prize in Economics recognized research that showed a clear link between democratic institutions and increased economic prosperity. But for another thing, many of our lives would take unimaginable turns. Maria Lourdes Afiuni is a Venezuelan judge who was sentenced to prison for several years, tortured and abused, for rendering a verdict that the government didn't like. Esir Öykü is a Turkish pianist and piano teacher who lost her job for signing a petition on Twitter. Take a moment to think, do you know anyone who works in law? Do you know any public officials? Any teachers? Professors? The thing about democracy is it's kind of like your paycheck, right? You don't think about it so much in your day-to-day. You've really come to rely on it, it's just kind of there, and you don't notice it, but if it were gone, you would definitely know. None of this is entirely new. Democracies have always been susceptible to populism, even if the threat is high right now. And to try and solve all of this on a whole of society level would require so many different kinds of interventions. That would be the subject for a 500-page report, not a TED Talk. But as someone who spent the last decade in journalism, I do have some thoughts on how you individually can try and stay outside of this vicious circle, how you can individually fight this development, and how you can remain engaged with the issues that we're facing as a society. So I'd like to leave you today with 3 suggestions, recommendations. My first one is to understand our information ecosystem. And this is important. We no longer have information integrity. We grew up assuming that if we read something or we saw something, it was true, right? That is no longer the case. It's not the case online, and it's not the case in print. Anyone can host a YouTube channel, anyone can build a website, anyone can self-publish a book. Whether or not something spreads depends more on how it makes you feel than whether it's true. And a few loud voices can significantly distort public discourse. My second suggestion is for you to be very intentional with your attention, because intentionally curating an information diet will help you stay outside of this overwhelm. And I promise you, it's okay not to have an opinion on everything, and it's much less overwhelming to go deep into topics that you really care about rather than going wide and trying to perfectly understand everything all of the time. I suggest that you prioritize text and that you prioritize long form. Practice stretching your attention span. Stretch it the way that you would any other muscle. Take breaks from the news when you need to. And try and use social media more like a library, where you intentionally go and seek out content and creators that are interesting to you, rather than simply letting the algorithm dictate what finds you. And my third suggestion to you is to look for what you're missing. Our natural tendency is to seek out information and content and arguments that we already believe in. This is called confirmation bias. I encourage you to genuinely question your side. Question whatever party, whatever philosophy you usually find yourself agreeing with. If you do not disagree with your side on at least one issue, you have not cultivated opinions, you have picked a sports team. Be suspicious of certainty. There's always something that we do not know yet. And try and change your mind about one thing, big or small, every year. Right now, all of you and I and everyone in this room, we are wrong about so many things. Try and find those things. Try and actively and continuously update your mental model of reality to bring it closer to what is measurably, empirically true. And I know it sounds like a bold claim for me to say that, if you keep doom scrolling, we'll all slide into autocracy. And of course, that would be oversimplified. But we are endangering, we are sacrificing our democracy. We are making it more susceptible to erosion. We are encouraging populism and encouraging polarization. And the thing is, that is exactly how democracies today are dying. They're not dying in these big, bold revolutions that you may imagine. They're dying in small little increments that each of them individually don't seem so bad, that maybe we don't pay that much attention to. Start paying attention again. Thank you.